Nick here with Temple of Geek, and I'm here with Todd McFarlane, who is, I mean, you're now like a comic book icon.
I'm an old man now. I've been around a long time. That just means I've had a long career.
Exactly, icon. That's once you get to that reach that certain age.
Old man icon. The other one sounds better. So, yep.
So going back to the early days, what were your inspirations when you were first getting started? Who were the artists that really got you inspired to start to create?
So I began collecting when I was 16. So that puts me at 1977, right? And so comic book. I'd never collected comic books. So all of this was a Pandora's box. And at that point, the people that blew my mind. Number one was George Perez, right? Like, I would look at his pages and go, "What? You can put that much artwork in a page after page after page?" And what was phenomenal about George at that time was when I started collecting, he was doing the Avengers and the Fantastic Four. He was doing two books, and they were both team books, and he was putting in all this detail. It blew my mind.
Yeah.
And then probably right on his heels, I discovered John Byrne, and I thought John Byrne, and again the soon-to-be the X-Men, right, the Uncanny X-Men. He came on, and that thing shoots to the top of the charts, and his attention to detail, especially with Terry Austin doing the inking on him, was amazing. But John Byrne was also doing two books because he was also at that point doing Marvel Team Up, which was the book of Spider-Man and then some guest star every time. And I thought some of those were like crazy good too, right? So, but eventually I just sort of started tumbling over like everybody. I thought John Buscema doing Conan was like, wow, like he was just classically great, right? I just, like, he could put the camera anywhere, and I bought it. His brother, Sal Buscema, was doing the Hulk. He was being inked by Ernie Chan at that point, and it looked like he had like muscles everywhere and compared to what Herb Trimpe had been doing. I'm trying to think who else was in that era. It blew my mind away. Eventually, I started following different people for different reasons. A little bit later after that, there was a guy named Marshall Rogers was doing some detective comic books, and he had this. He was the first guy that I paid attention to capes. I went, oh man, look how cool Batman looks like with that big cape. So Marshall Rogers was my cape influence. Gil Kane, he was winding down, but he was still doing like some really great, powerful action stuff. And what was weird is the guy that I didn't understand at that point, and I like, oh man, I feel bad. Like, I didn't understand Jack Kirby, right? As a young kid, like coming right in, I'm like, what? Look at all these other guys doing all this detail and stuff, and his is just like big and clunky. And then as I got older and I got into the business, I went, no, Jack Kirby is a genius because he's hitting all the buttons of what big melodrama and hyperbolic sort of imagery, Broadway I call it. He killed it more than anybody else in terms of his bigness. And then you had guys like Neil Adams because he could just draw better than sort of anybody else. And I know I'm forgetting a couple people. If it pops in, I'll let you know.
So every artist eventually, finds their own voice and how they're going to create. How would you? And I know that this could have evolved over the years. How would you describe your art style?
Well, here's, I think, the evolution of it, because I kind of was aware of it. I knew when I broke in and I got my first job, and I think the first printed stuff came out like at the beginning of 1985. I had just finished college with a graphic arts degree, right? And I knew that my drawing was average at best. On a scale of 1 to 10, even if I say a 5, I'm probably cheating a little bit high. So I just got lucky that they gave me a job because I was relentless with sending out so many samples. And I knew that it was mediocre. Mm-hmm. And I was in a sea of other people that I was gonna be competing with. And so I go, what can I do to be a little bit different? Because that's all you can do. Yeah. And so I started applying, especially once I took over, but you saw it almost immediately, like in the Scorpio Rose, But then when I moved over to Infinity Incorporated, I used graphic layouts to design the pages, and then I drew within the graphic designs, hoping, fingers crossed, that I could basically baffle them with my bullshit and them not notice I couldn't draw that well, right?
Yeah.
So I was swinging like shiny objects of like these fancy pages, and it was working because I think by the end of the second year I was on Infinity, which was near the run, that they were having like voting in like different magazines, and somebody phoned me up and said, "Todd, did you see you came in number 5?" And I went, "What?" And of course, the guys who were ahead of me were like John Byrne and Perez and all the guys I looked up to. And I went, "What?" And I'm like, man, so they're buying into that whole design graphics stuff. As time went by, I was getting paid to draw 8, 10, 12 hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully your skill was going to get better, which I think it did, because you can see the progression of my art. And so I didn't have to rely on the graphics as much as the actual drawing got better. And then when I moved from DC over to Marvel, they said, you don't get to do any of that graphic stuff. That's not what we're about. We don't do it, which is actually good because it forced me to just focus on the drawing in and of itself. But, by the time I got to Spider-Man and I was at the end of my Hulk run, you could see the graphic coming back in a little bit, right? Of Spider-Man busting out of the pages, doing, thick panel thing. If somebody was getting punched, their explosion, the edges of it were all craggly, and sometimes I would do like all horizontal or hard. I mean, it was just having fun with the page, and the drawing was good, or at least better than what it was when I first broke in. So I think the combo then became my style at that point, right? They go, oh, there's McFarlane. He's kind of graphic. He's sort of bombastic because I was learning from Kirby and Gil Kane and those guys, and it's just fun to look at, right? I like in terms of just even today for raw drawing ability, I lack a lot, right? Compared to, I could name you dozens and dozens of people who can draw around me. But what I've heard from people is they're going, yeah, no, Todd, but the energy you had on the pages, like that worked. And in comic books, that's to me what you have to sell is not that I can do a great Aunt May page. I had to be able to do a great Spider-Man page when it counted, right? Or a good supervillain page when it counted.
So, obviously Spider-Man also launched things even bigger for you. And wasn't he in a black suit when you took over? Yeah. And could you just talk about for a moment what you did to transition Spider-Man in the beginning?
Yeah, so I've told the story many, many times. It was like when I went into the Spider-Man office, of which all the editors said, don't go in there. But I did anyways, because that's just who I am, personality-wise. And they said, yeah, we got room. We want to, yeah, Todd, I think we got room for you on one of our Spider-Man books. But he was in the black costume, to your point, right? Yeah. And that was a remnant of Secret Wars. And to me, at this point, like your sort of internal emotional promotions are that you get to get characters that your neighbors have heard of or your family. Yeah. And so I was doing the Hulk, and I'm like, oh man, I'm doing a Hulk, like a real character. Like they didn't know Infinity Incorporated, they didn't care. Spider-Man, I go, I could do Spider-Man, but Spider-Man in my mind was the guy in the red and in the blue costume, the classic, right? And I'm like, what? I don't want to draw him in a black costume. And that was a little bit of my ego cockiness getting in the way. That's like, no, I'm not going to draw Spider-Man. And they were like, Todd, well, they like the costume, like, and I'm like, well, just take it off him and give it to somebody else, and then get back to the classic. But they wanted to keep that black costume. Yeah. So again, that becomes the advent of creating Venom. I show them the visual. They sign off the visual. Everything's cool. They give the visual to David Michelini, who was a writer. He comes up with the story that's Eddie Brock, information I could have used in advance. I wouldn't have designed that character the way it was if I knew it was a human, right? But at that point, they had signed off. I liked the design. And it was like, okay, well, if it works for Bruce Banner and the Hulk, they can shift sizes, then it can work for Eddie. But that whole process was just to get back to him. For me personally, I didn't feel I had drawn my first Spider-Man page till the last page of issue 300, when he's finally back in his classic uniform. And I'm like, yeah, I'm drawing Spider-Man. Up to that, it was a reasonable facsimile of this character called Spider-Man, right? So, and we end up getting a big character out of it by I call it happy accident, which it was. So.
What was your impetus for starting your own company, and of course bringing in a character you created when you were about 16, Spawn?
I didn't start my own company. A group, a collective group, started Image Comic Book. The conversations were going between Rob Liefeld, Eric Larson, and myself. And so you just phone each other while you're drawing just to get through the day. And we were just goofing around having all these sort of conversations. And Rob was saying that he was going to go and do his own book. And Eric had a independent streak in him. He was going to go do a book. My wife and I were getting close to having, she was pregnant and we were going to have our first child. And I was like, Marvel's starting to wear me out to nub. And so as part of those conversations of just talking about silly comic book stuff and whatever else, but also going, at some point, we recognize that, like, well, if Rob's going to do his own book, and I'm thinking of maybe, and Eric's going to do his own book, why do it in 3 different places, scattered? Why don't we just do it under one banner? Nobody's ever done that historically. I mean, there have been people who've done their own, create their own books, but nobody has done it like collectively. And so at that point, we thought 3 would be like, oh man, this would be big news. And then Rob said, hey, I got a buddy named Jim Valentino. Can he come? And the answer was, yeah, 3, 4, like the more the merrier. And so 4 was the number when Rob and I went and flew to New York to basically break the news to Marvel that we were quitting. But we landed the day before because the meeting was in the morning. And within that short period of 12, 15 hours, I happened to run into Jim Lee, was able to convince Jim Lee to come jump ship. He said, hey, I've got Will Portacio. Can he jump with us? Oh, and then on the way back, like I'm going, wow, we got Jim Lee. It's cool. On the way back to the hotel, Mark Silvestri happened to be staying at that hotel. To this day, I still don't know why. But I saw him, and I went, hey, Mark, can I talk to you? And I gave him the spiel. And Mark, by the morning, I said, we need an answer before we go to this meeting. And he phoned up in the morning and said, I'm in. So we landed in New York with 4, and by the time we went to that meeting that next morning, which was about 8 or 9 in the morning, there were 7 of us. And we had 2, 3, between Wilson, Jim Lee, and Mark Silvestri, we had 3 mutant artists, right? Yeah. The other 4 of us weren't mutant. The mutants, the reason that's important is because the X-Men and all the mutant books were sort of pretty much the top-selling books. If you looked at the top 10, they controlled it. Yeah. So I go, wow, we just took some of their heavy hitters out of that top 10. Man, this is going to be a good meeting. And Jim Lee came to that meeting with us, too. So it was Rob and Jim Lee and myself and my wife holding our baby at that point. So
I know you're somebody who looks to the future, doesn't really take too much stock in the past. So what are you excited for? What's next? What are you working towards? What are you looking forward to? Next steps for you?
Well, a couple things on the comic book front. We just sent Spawn 365 to the printer, which basically means in 3 years we're heading to 400, right? So I pretty soon I'm going to have to start planning for 400. What are we going to do, right? Because 300, 301. We set the record, right? We got a lot of attention. I introduced this thing called the Time Rip that basically brought in all these characters that expanded the Spawn universe out in 2021. So a lot happened at 300. So now pressure's on. Like, oh yeah, how are you going to top that for 400? As I sit here, I don't know, but I've got a lot of good creative minds, so we'll come up with something fun. The 3 of the books that we introduced in 2021 as part of the expansion King Spawn and Gunslinger and The Scorch, which is a team-up book. All of those are now in their 40s. And so within the next less than a year, all three of those are going to be hitting issue 50, right? And I rolled them out every other month. So we're going to have issue 50, 2 months later another issue 50, and 2 months later another issue 50. So there's going to be sort of 3 half anniversary books. And probably because they're going to be coming out in quick succession, we'll try and see if there's a way to somehow tie it together, either marketing-wise or story-wise or both. Who knows, right? Yeah. But 50 issues is, I think, for me, I've always advocated as the president of Image Comics, I've advocated to my peers, do 50 issues, do 50 issues, do 50 issues, then you can quit, and then go do another 50 issues, another, like, it's magical for a couple reasons. There's not one book that we've done at Image that's reached issue 50 that hasn't gotten outside the bubble, and the bubble being the comic book industry. Yeah. Everyone that's gotten to 50 or more has either gotten a video game, T-shirts, hat, TV, movies. It's got outside of comic books. That's why you want to do it. Plus, you also have a nice library that you can do trade paperback, you can do hardcovers, you can do 6, 12, 18 issues, but at the end, you can also do this thing called a compendium, that big fat book, the telephone book. Mm-hmm. Come on, man, get one compendium book, and then you can go and you can go. And if you happen to sell your idea into Hollywood and it works, you've got a minimum of 50 issues you can mix and match. Yeah. And so I don't understand, literally today as I sit here, I'd like to have a debate with somebody of going, how does doing 5 issues of a book, it getting bought on TV and it becomes the biggest thing on TV, how does that help your comic book? Like, I understand maybe it might help you a little bit depending on your deal you made in Hollywood, although the first deal you make in Hollywood is usually your worst. So where you're going to make your money is on the comic book end. Ask Robert Kirkman. Like, I don't understand. The examples are staring you in the face. Robert Kirkman didn't make his millions initially at the beginning off Walking Dead. He made it off his Walking Dead comic books because he kept those rights. And he's like, yeah, you guys go and make this show popular. I'm just going to sell a boatload of my books and my reprints and my trade paperbacks. But he had 120 issues when they started that show, and by the end he had 190. He didn't have 5. If you have 5 issues, you can't even do one trade paperback. Like, so how are you taking advantage of, you created the hottest TV show and you've only got 5 issues of it? I don't get it. I don't get it. Long term, I don't get it. But you guys do you, right? And so I'm going to be having here in less than a year, I'm going to have 4 Spawn, King Spawn, Gunslinger, and Scorch. I'm going to have 4 titles that are 50 or older. Just me. Just me, right? So, okay, which means I can do 7 compendiums with Spawn, and I can do 3. I have 10 compendiums myself, right? Yeah. And minus my partners, I think the rest of the world, in terms of Americana comic books, superhero comic books, I think have 6.
Those are some good numbers right there.
Well, no. Yeah. It's either I'm Superman, because Todd's got 10, and the rest of the world's got 6, or they're just not putting their head down and grinding. I mean, right. So Robert Kirkman, who's had a pretty good life, he's got 4 compendiums he can do just on Walking Dead, and he can do another 2 or 3 with Invincible. So he's got 7. I said at the beginning, not non-partners, right? He's got 7. Eric Larson up to issue 250 or more on Savage Dragon. He's got 5. He could but everybody else in our industry combined has got 6, right? It's just I don't get it. I don't get it because I think that our peers want to have a good life, like we've had, and the blueprint's there to some extent, and they're looking for shortcuts, and there's no shortcuts, right? Like, it took me almost 30 years to get to issue 300. So I'm not saying do 300. I'm saying 50. Give me 50, and I promise you'll get outside the bubble. So.
Well, I can't wait to see what you continue to do. Such an amazing career up till now, and you're still going strong. So
Yeah.
we can't wait to see what you got in
No,
store for us.
I've got a lot of enthusiasm, and I still think that the best is yet to come. Because I know what I'm doing right now, and I can't talk about all, but I know it's coming down the pipeline, and go, shoot, we still got some rabbits up our sleeve, right? So I'm gonna pull a couple out. Again, it's not, doesn't have to be for everybody. I try not to be hyperbolic too. I try not to say, oh yeah, everything I do is this is the hottest thing. What I like to, I don't want to be the boy who cries wolf. I want, when I do say wolf, people will pay attention, because they go, oh, he doesn't do it that often. So we're doing a lot of new books the last couple of years.
Yeah.
But I'm not doing 10 covers on them, and I'm not charging $5.99 for them and whatever. I'm going, here, 1-2 covers on this book, $2.99. It's a good sample price. If you like it, come to the thing, and if not, don't worry about it. And yes, if we get the issue 25, 50 or something, I might do a double-size issue. But I need to establish that people like this character. The story has to matter more than anything else at the end of the day if you want to have any longevity. Because the longevity, this is the piece, is the longevity is the value that people don't understand, right? Like, once you do enough issues of anything, you become kind of indestructible, in that there's no issue you can write or draw if people like you, that they will stop liking you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so you can, I don't care who you are. I don't care, you be Scott Snyder or Greg Capullo or Jim Lee, whoever. There's nothing they could write or draw in their next issue, no matter how bad it is, that people go, well, I liked them for 25 years, but no, I don't like that panel. Yeah, like, they won't do it.
They won't.
What they will do actually is go, he had a bad day. The longevity comes in. Do you think that Hank, I'm going to use sports now, do you think Hank Aaron ever went 0 for 4 with 3 strikeouts? Of course he did, right? But people knew that overall, when they looked at his record, they go, he's one of the greats. And so when he was 0 for 4, they just go, don't worry about it. Tomorrow's another day. And that's what longevity gives you in our industry. They'll cover for you. They'll go, it's not his best cover, but did you see that one he did like last year? Like, they'll make the excuses for you, right? So you don't have to have the pressure of everything's got to be perfect and great and perfect and great. What you can do then at that point is just get the work done.
Yeah.
You think my 365 issues this one, you think they're all gems? Of course not. It's like,
I'm not going to tell you, like,
they're not. I'll tell you, they're not.
Yeah.
It's like giving birth to 365 kids. Some of them are going to be brain surgeons, and some of them are going to be jailbirds, right? Like, there's going to be this wide range, and so you get that. But what ends up happening is people either say, I like Spawn the character, or I don't.
Yeah.
And it's not because of that one issue there, that one issue there. It's now
The whole compendium, the whole, like,
yes.
storytelling.
That's
Yeah.
it. I've stacked it, so it's like, now I can just put it off in a corner and just keep going and going and going. And either you like the character, or you don't. Like, what story could they write that get people go, I like Batman, but I'm not buying Batman anymore, right? There's no story. They would just go, okay, that was a bad one. I'll just go buy something else. So, anyways, that's my old dad pitch of like why you need to do something like for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And let me tell you, to get to 50 issues, I can do the math. 4 years and 2 months. Put a book out that's 4 years and 2 months.
Yeah.
And here's my head rub, just to give it to you. If I was to look at 1,000 my peers, you know how many of them have been in the industry for 4 years and 2 months or more?
God, I wouldn't be able to.
A shit ton. A
Metric
shit ton.
yeah.
A shit ton of them. And yet, they didn't devote any of that 4 years and 2 months to do 50 issues of their own book. Some of them, many of them, did it for other people's characters. They didn't do it for their own. And it's like, okay, some of you have been around for 12 years, 13 years, you could have done it 3 times over. You could have had a book, 50, quit, create another book, 50, quit, and do another book. You'd be on your 3rd group of 50. And instead you got none, and you were doing it all for somebody else, right? Like, I don't know, the fruits of your labor, right? Like, it's pretty good when it works out. So, but I'll just do my gig. I'll just do my gig. Thanks for not having a bunch of competition, right? So,
That's all you can do. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
all right.